Okay, welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host with Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. And really another shot heard around the world, the Supreme Court leak. Your take?
Well, I think there's a couple of takeaways that we need to look at, the first of which is the leak itself. This is unprecedented in modern history that an opinion would be leaked to the press. It is absolutely unfathomable that anybody would consider this appropriate, especially since Chief Justice Roberts has already come out and said, yes, this was an early draft of an opinion, but early drafts are not necessarily the final draft. So this may have no bearing on what the decision actually is.
And does it actually even go back, excuse me, but goes back to the Supreme Court individual that died like 3 years ago? That was part of it. Why do I bring it up? Because it's
yes,
like
it mentions some of the arguments of Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
No, and the conservative.
It mentions a number of them. Okay. That's the thing, is that most people, have gone either batshit crazy against or batshit crazy for. Very few people have actually read the 98 pages. And the leak itself is bad enough. And it's very obvious this was a very liberal clerk for one of the justices who is basically trying to rally the troops because the Democrats have nothing they can run on. So this is, look over here. Oh, ignore inflation, ignore Afghanistan, ignore the southern border. This was meant for nothing else than to rally liberal troops. Now,
I think the timing of it was not fortunate for the liberal Democrats, because there's way too much time till November, plenty of time for gas hikes, several Biden miscues and gaffes, and who knows what else they can screw up, right? So if it was an October surprise, dangerous for Republicans.
It would have been more effective as an October surprise. The problem with making it an October surprise is that the actual decision is expected somewhere around July or August. So they can't do anything in October if the information's already out. The big thing, though, is that the mainstream media is hyping this up and completely overblowing what overturning Roe v. Wade is. Now, I'm going to go on the record. I am pro-choice. I do not want the government telling me that I can or can't do anything. So, yeah, I do not want the government stepping in and saying you cannot have an abortion. But that's not what Roe v. Wade does. If Roe v. Wade is overturned,
gives it up to the states.
It gives it to the states. Now, there's already 30 states that have said they will codify the right to have an abortion. And this is exactly what that draft opinion called for if you actually read it. So,
go ahead, I'm sorry.
If your state does not have a law saying you cannot have an abortion, overturning Roe v. Wade literally has no effect because your state has not outlawed abortion, so it's still legal.
Yeah, but you're talking about people being informed, and oftentimes on the emotionally driven left, just like when Trump was first elected, they had the vagina rallies and all this stuff. They didn't even know anything about Trump. I actually asked someone, a woman, so you went to the rally? what were you protesting? And she didn't know. So it's not you're assuming these people actually understand what you understand, and I think that is so much of a bridge too far.
I'm actually assuming they don't understand it, which is why I'm explaining it.
Yeah, that is true. But I think it will. I don't know. Here's a quintessential question. When you have problems filling up your tank with gas, when there's a recession, which I do actually believe is going to happen, if you do the math, they had a 0.5-point increase in the federal funds rate, interest rate hike, which is really big, and not the first and not the last, I should say. So, what are you more worried about, Roe versus Wade, or gee, can I actually feed my family?
That's exactly true. A recent poll asking Americans what was most important to them. Abortion rights was ninth. So the southern border, inflation was number one. The economy was number two. Southern border was up there. There's 8 other issues that people are worried about before they consider abortion rights. So
and plus, it's also not. It's almost equally divided. So it's not something that's like a 70-30 that Americans are 74, a pro, abortion. It's like a 50-50 proposition. So it's not.
It's not 50-50, but it's a lot more complicated than people are making it sound, because right now it's actually about 60-40 according to recent polls. People are in favor of having women have access to abortions. However, it's 80-20 according to these same polls that people are against late-term abortions. So it's not a matter of having a law saying, yes, you can have an abortion, or no, you can't have an abortion. People are not in favor of open-ended laws that say yes or no. They want laws like the one in Missouri, which is what the case in front of the Supreme Court was about, saying you can have an abortion up to 15 weeks.
Yeah, I think that you have a very quintessential point, more than salient, and that is the whole thing that, and I think most Americans probably do believe, or the 60-70% believe in the right to choose. But but everything else in liberalism, it goes a bridge too far. What, in Virginia they were talking of basically killing babies, at birth.
Yeah, there have been stories about that. I don't have any actual statistics or information about those.
No, the governor of Virginia was in favor of that.
But it is amazing that, once you get into the weeds and you go, this is not a black and white issue, people are not in favor of the open-endedness of it. And also, this was obviously meant to inflame people. So if you take a step back and actually look at what the law says, look at what repealing Roe v. Wade would do, constitutional attorneys who are pro-choice for decades have said Roe v. Wade is a bad case law. And
most lawyers, yes, most constitutionalists agree with that, yes.
And that either Congress or the local legislatures should be passing laws stating this is what this state allows. Or in the case of Congress, this is what passes in the United States. At this point, I think the U.S. is too divided for Congress to do anything. I think it's going to come down to the local legislatures to pass what's legal in their states. And that's where this should be decided, is the legislature. And that's actually spelled out in this leaked opinion. And as I said earlier, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who we all know was a liberal judge, had stated that during her life. So this is not a right or left issue. This is a matter of The Supreme Court needs to follow the law and not the politics. The Congress can deal with the politics of it, but the Supreme Court needs to stay above that.
I would agree with that, but the issue that I see when you look at the political landscape, it was a lifeboat for the sinking Biden administration. You can rally
Yes.
the usual suspects and then additionally others, and it was a real sinking ship with no life support. This at least invigorates them. I don't know how long, but I don't know how long it's really going to last. He did a press conference today that said he's actually reducing the deficit, and he said something like next year he'll reduce the deficit by something like 1.5 trillion, a total fabrication. So,
the deficit has skyrocketed.
And he also made the pronouncement that the Make America Great Again, the MAGA movement, is the most extreme a political ideology in American history, not the neo-Nazis, not Antifa, but MAGA. Yeah.
And that's been fact checked and disputed already. It's simply not the truth. The whole point of this leak was to invigorate the far left to come out during the midterm elections, because they've been saying they're going to stay home because they're not happy with Biden. But it's already starting to backfire, because first of all, it's also invigorating the far right to come out and keep this happening. But more than that, it's highlighting the hypocrisy, because there's already videos all over the internet where people are going out and interviewing pro-choice women at these protests. And they're all saying, the message is, men should not be passing laws about their body. And they're being asked the question, well, then what's a woman? And they're like, well, does a trans woman count?
Oh, no, so the other thing I'm thinking, doesn't that blow up the whole shifting, sexual identification? I mean, why can't I have an abortion? If I feel like a woman, I mean, I want my rights too, because I can have an abortion. I mean, Mayor Pete took, maternity leave for 2 months or 3 months in the middle of the supply chain crisis. I mean, couldn't he have an abortion?
Right.
So it's not just women that are being affected. It's men who identify as women. I mean, wink and a nod. Yeah.
All right. And that's coming back to bite them. And of course, the argument that always gets put down by the far left is, well, it's the woman's body, except the concept of an abortion actually affects 3 people. It's the woman, it's the man whose child that is, and it's the child. So it's a bigger issue than they want to make it, because they want the simple slogan, and it's not that simple an issue. And the fact of the matter is, I think if they actually argued on the complexity, they would have a more compelling argument for keeping abortions legal. I mean, I go back to Bill Clinton's statement where he said abortions should be safe, legal, and rare.
Yes, well, that train left the station 20 years ago. Yeah. I guess the biggest takeaway, I think, given the timing, I think it's a tempest in the teapot until the actual decision is outlined. I also think, as we talked about, in terms of the divisions between late term and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know how impactful it's going to be. But my other last takeaway, and I love your comment, is it still might have another unintended consequence, and that's when the nutcases go out there and protest. People in their living room who have had enough of this shit for the last 2 years are going to say, oh, God, more shit, craziness. So what do you think of that?
Well, we're already seeing that. Just yesterday, pro-choice protesters attacked a police officer in Los Angeles, which of course then goes to the defund the police movement and the rising crime rates. So, yeah, if this is kept to an intelligent debate, which
it will not be.
Right, which let's face
You're
it,
talking about America 20.
no political debate
Impossible.
in America is ever kept to an intellectual debate. But it's going to bring in all of these things. And when you see these protests and when you see them get violent like they did yesterday and attacking the police, that's empowering the other side. And they're saying, enough is enough. Will it bring out the left wing?
Verdict on
Probably, but not enough to, it's going to bring out everybody, I think, on both sides.
I think it's almost a wash, given all the factors.
Yes.
Probably a little bit in favor of the left, but given all the factors, including the nutcase factor, it could be almost a wash. But there is, you do have the Ministry of Truth. I believe that was what Stalin had, but now Biden has that too.
Well, the term actually comes from George Orwell's 1984. But yes, that is what the Department of Homeland Security has put together. They're calling it the Disinformation Governance Board. And it is led by somebody who led the charge saying that the Steele dossier was real and the Hunter Biden laptop story was false. So you have a disinformation board headed by someone who's an expert in spreading disinformation.
Very well done, and someone who's heading the fledgling department that doesn't impress me as one of the greatest intellects on the planet.
No,
given the TikTok videos,
she's
nonsense.
She's clearly not a Mensa candidate. Yeah.
No, she's not. No, not at all. But speaking of Mensa candidates and lack thereof, we've talked about this and everyone's. But to me, I'm not a doctor. Obviously, you're the Dr. Lopkin, but I am not a doctor, and I still am very, very amazed and aghast by the fact that Biden's cognitive decline is like exponential. It's not like a monthly slow slip or slow slide. You see it day by day. Like, in fact, he just gave a press conference today when he talked about MAGA being the most extreme element, and he was literally led away after 2 questions. Because I'll take questions. And then he always has this reoccurring theme. They told me. Who is they?
Yeah,
it's
there's always.
It's like your parents.
Yes,
you're the president of the United States. No one tells you. What's going on here?
They told me I can't take questions. They told me I can't go to Ukraine. He's obviously being led around. He said that on a number of occasions. And every time he makes a speech, it does get worse and worse. And we make fun of Kamala's speeches, but Kamala's speeches are just bad. She obviously has a message, but she's not articulate enough to get it across. With Biden, you see him slipping sometimes just in the middle of a speech. He will just lose where he is. We saw just recently the Easter Bunny lead him away from taking questions. They're obviously.
Actually, in 2 days ago, he was doing a speech, and again, this is for the teleprompter, and said there's no senators from Delaware. It's a small state. Really?
He's obviously not dealing with a full deck anymore. And again, we talked about this going back to terrestrial radio. I was told by members of the Florida Democratic State Committee when Biden announced he was going to run that he had dementia and he was not capable of doing the job. This is the Democrats saying this. So this was known, and yet I think the thought process of the Democratic National Committee was an impaired Biden is still better than losing outright if, say, Bernie or Kamala were to get the nomination.
No, it was really a choice between Bernie because he was or Elizabeth. More Bernie. They had her drop out, Elizabeth Warren. That kind of screwed up things for Bernie, and basically they knew they would lose with Sanders, who, by the way, hates America, but that's another story. And they had Joe. He was sold and packaged with all the discontent with Trump as moderate, and he's so cognitively impaired that he's just captive to the far. Like, he doesn't even know what day it is. Like right now, he just gave his speech with that press conference several hours ago, and I'm sure he's just taking a nap and maybe having some ice cream.
And it's frightening that the mainstream media does not cover this, but when you take a look at how the mainstream media covered Trump and every gaffe that he made, and the White House would say, oh, that's not what he meant this, and they would go, oh, well, that's horrible. How many times has the White House had to clean up what Joe Biden said? Every time he makes a speech, the press office goes clean up in aisle 7 and rushes out to fix what he said. And yet the mainstream media keeps giving him a pass.
Well, I think it's really very, very problematic to our democracy. You don't have to harp on it. I get it. You might be left leaning, and how things have disintegrated 30, 40 years ago with Carter. The mainstream media, they carried a little bit of his water, but no, they were hard on him. And the thing that's really troubling, he barely speaks, Biden, compared to most presidents. And even with that, it's clean up in aisle 7. If he actually spoke, oh my God. If he went to Ukraine, we'd be in a nuclear war.
Well, remember, I mean, some of Biden's gaffes include basically giving Russia permission for a minor incursion.
Yes.
Telling U.S. troops in Poland that they'd be seeing Ukraine firsthand. So he's already had several gaffes, about Ukraine that the White House has to keep cleaning up. And it is really dangerous that people are not covering. And it's just the United States media that's not covering this. Because if you follow foreign media, they're all over the story.
Yes, I've seen that. And speaking of dementia, though, on an unrelated but somewhat related subject, there's Dianne Feinstein. There's reports that it's now common knowledge in the Senate that she doesn't even know what she's worse than Biden, and she's on the Armed Services Committee. This country's screwed.
Well, yes, but the difference is that Dianne Feinstein has not been at votes at the Senate, has not been at committee meetings. She's taken the time off, which is also a problem for the Biden administration because it's a Democratic vote that they don't have there. But yeah, she at least has separated herself. There's still a debate whether or not she has cognitive issues or not. Her folks have come out saying she's still healthy. She's mentally there. She's just not physically healthy. But regardless of whether it's her physical or mental health, she had enough sense to pull herself back. She's not in the middle of all of this.
Well, that's true. Now let's look at and we talked about the political landscape. You look at the senatorial. We all know Congress is going to flip. That's a hello. Not even any worth spending any time on that. But the senatorial races, if you do the math, 9 solid Dems, including our beloved senator from Connecticut. So you have 9 solid, 2 leaning. Okay, so that gives you 11 with 5 toss-ups. Okay. But then you look at the Republican side, 3 leaning Repub, 16 solid Repubs. Just doing the math, it seems pretty definitive that the Republicans will at least pick up 2 or 3 enough to flip. Correct?
Yeah, I have no doubt that the Senate will flip. I don't think it's going to be, I mean, there are some people saying, oh, they're going to get to 60. I don't think they're going to. I think you're probably going to see a 52-48 Senate.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe a 53-47, Beyond that, I don't think they're going to pick up that many seats, but
But
it is
enough to
enough to
block.
flip this. Yeah,
It's
it's
enough
enough
to
to
block
flip the
Biden's
Senate. It's enough to flip the Senate. It's enough to take control of the House and essentially kill the Biden agenda. And
Plus,
again,
have
we've mentioned,
investigations on Hunter, impeaching Mayorkas and others. It's going to be a whole new. It's not going to be your father's Buick. It's a whole new, different landscape.
yeah, it's definitely going to be different. Once the Republicans have subpoena powers, they're going to do investigations. And there's already criminal and civil suits that are going to be picked up by this new Congress. You have the AG of Delaware investigating Hunter Biden. That's going to be looked into by congressional staffers. You now have Adam Schiff being sued by the computer store owner that got the Hunter Biden laptop because Schiff has slandered him. He's suing other Democrats as well. And that is going to be investigated by Congress because Schiff affects the January 6th. He consistently spread disinformation about the Steele dossier. It's tied into what's going on with Hunter Biden. So you're going to see a lot of investigations move forward very quickly.
It will be must-see TV, and I don't know how Biden escapes that. It's going to be very difficult, especially the Hunter situation. You're looking at also very interesting. Joe Manchin appeared at a Republican primary rally. Is that telling or not? And there's other information that's saying that if it wasn't for the majority leader in the Senate, that he would, which he does not like, he would actually flip.
There is that possibility, but him appearing for the in the Republican primary ad has less to do with him flipping parties and more to do with his desire to stop Build Back Better, because the candidate that he appeared for was accused by the Republican opponent of supporting Build Back Better, which was not true. And that's actually what got Manchin involved in that campaign, was the fact that, no, this is someone who is against Build Back Better. The public
against
needs
the filibuster.
No, he's for the filibuster.
No, I mean, I'm saying against taking away the filibuster.
Oh, yes. Yeah. He's against taking away the filibuster. And he felt that, his constituents needed to know that if they voted for this person, he was going to stand up against Build Back Better. He was not going to vote to repeal the filibuster, and they needed to know that.
Interesting. Well, speaking of needing to know, de Blasio, America's worst mayor, is now $2.5 million in debt. And talk about being the hubris of running for president. When you get yourself $2.5 million in debt, he's staying in a 5-star hotel in New York with his lovely wife. Talk about loser with a capital L. His career is over, and rightfully so.
Well, even when he ran for president, his career was done. I mean, he never scored more than the margin of error. Even New Yorkers didn't support him running for president. So, when your own constituents tell you, no, you're done, it's time to walk away. But we've said this before, most politicians, both sides of the aisle, there are huge egos involved, and they really can't be told, well, no, it's time to go away.
Yes, I think that is true also with Elizabeth Warren, because I think she's asserting herself, knowing that Biden's going to be incapable of running in 2024. She's starting to make noises, but look yourself in the mirror, Elizabeth. No one likes you. You have no good ideas. Just please stop.
Well, the problem with Elizabeth Warren, and it's the same problem with AOC. It's the same problem with Bernie. And you see this on the other side as well. These are people who are in secure Democratic districts. These are the districts that you could put a coffee cup with a D on it and it'll win an election. So they don't have any idea what the rest of the country is thinking.
That is
They're,
a good point. I would agree with that. Yes,
yeah, they're
no
in
doubt.
their bubbles. And unless they start listening to the rest of the country, they don't really understand the national picture.
Yeah, but they also don't understand their own limitations. Like Clint Eastwood said, a man has to know his limitations. Well, a person has to know their limitations.
Yes.
And de Blasio, even Kamala running for president. Really? You've done nothing. You were appointed your seat as a senator. You've done nothing, you know. You've always been rubber stamped. These people, and Bernie, he didn't have a job till he was 40. I think his first job was writing porn for some Penthouse magazine or something. Amazing. Speaking of amazing in terms of the Biden administration, there's growing and increasingly growing consensus that a recession is coming. In fact, the Fed just hiked interest rates by 0.5, which is quite a hefty margin, and that's not the last of it. Looking at, with Biden's at 38, I mean, on average in approval, a recession, is that like the end, or please help me?
Well, again, GDP came out last week that first quarter the economy shrunk 1.4%. Now, the traditional definition of a recession is 2 quarters of shrinking. So if we get a second quarter of this, that's a recession. There have been a number of financial people coming out trying to cover for the Biden administration, going, well, that's not really accurate anymore. We need to include other factors. Like, no, that's been the definition. It's still the definition.
It's still the definition, but regardless of the definition, if you do the math and you look at the inflation rate, the Fed's, this is not the first or only interest rate hike. Interest rates has, and this is actually Biden's own economic advisor, Gillespie or whatever his name is. I believe that's his name. Anyway, the point is interest rates have to meet or at least come close to the inflation rate. We've been addicted to zero interest for at least 20 years now. When you're looking at a car, now you're going to have to pay 8%, 7%. That's a recession. People are not to buy.
The interest rates are going to go up. It was raised by 0.5 point today, which is the first time it's been raised by 0.5 point since 2000.
And by the way, what is the Fed? Are they like on acid or something? A little slow to the draw. I mean, you give a college student in economics know
the Fed
better start raising interest rates with this recession because it's not transitory, it's real.
The Fed has always historically been slow on the draw. They are very reactive. And part of that is because their tools are limited. But in this case, a lot of it was that they went so far down to help during the 2009 recession, and then again in the self-created recession of the pandemic, that now they're stuck with no tools. So they're unwinding their purchases of securities. They've raised interest rates 0.5 point today. It is expected they will raise another 0.5 point at the next meeting and another 0.5 point at the following meeting. There is no way that can happen and before election day, we don't get pushed into a recession, given that we've already had the 1 quarter of shrinkage.
I concur with that 1,000%. And who cares about the technical definition when people are already paying 3 times as much for a gallon of gas? Meat's gone up. This is like, welcome. Get your leisure suits out because this is the 1970s reincarnated. It doesn't care. No one cares about the technical definition of something.
Right.
It's going to have a huge impact.
It's about how it feels. And the fact of the matter is, the general public feels this every time they go shopping for food, every time they fill up their cars. You can't hide this because it's part of the everyday landscape. And now you've had diesel fuel hit record highs. Now most people go, well, I don't use diesel fuel. Why should I care about that? That's what fuels the trucks that brings all of the groceries to the supermarket, which helps push up the price of everything you're buying.
Yes, I think another interesting, but we already talked about this in terms of Joe Biden's dementia. As these crises and the economic crisis becomes more acute, he's going to have more press conferences, and think that puts further fuel on the fire. People are going to obviously understand this person's not in charge. Speaking of someone that is in charge, Donald Trump endorsed J.D. Vance in Ohio. He's now 22-0. He's a kingmaker.
Yeah, 22 Republican candidates endorsed by Donald Trump won their primaries. Now, in contrast to this, the White House has announced that Biden is going to be going on the road and supporting Democratic candidates. And the only people excited about Biden supporting Democratic candidates are the Republicans.
Of course. Oh, my God. I mean, you'd say, I have to have my oil changed to get out of that meeting. I mean, like Stacey Abrams did. I don't know what she had. She had to go to motor vehicles or something. No, you do not want to be on the same stage with Lunch Pail Joe, by the way, who's now has a real estate value of $10 million, 2 houses. How does that happen? Joe Lunch Pail, Mr. Amtrak, now has 2 houses valued at over $10 million.
Yeah, I mean, that
must be the new math.
That's what goes on when you're a congressperson, when you're a senator. It just came out that 2 days before Joe Biden signed a bill promoting electric cars, Nancy Pelosi bought Tesla stock. Now, you think she didn't know that he was going to sign this? I mean, come on.
No, she's a financial genius.
Oh, of course.
That she went to Congress worth, I don't know, $200,000, and now she's worth, well, who knows, 30 million, 10 million, who cares?
Something like that.
No, she's a genius at investing. You know, someone that was both incapable of working at a Jiffy Lube are now multimillionaires, and then Biden has the audacity to talk about, again, rambling on about it's for millionaires, and stop it, Joe Lunch Pail. Lastly, the tolerant left literally attacked Dave Chapelle on his comedy tour called Netflix is a Joke, and someone attacked him.
Yeah, Netflix is a Joke is a comedy festival that is going on all over Los Angeles. Dave Chapelle was appearing at the Hollywood Bowl, and a person rushed the stage to attack him. This is the folks that are yelling how we need to be tolerant of transgender and tolerant of alternative lifestyles, but they're not tolerant of Dave Chapelle.
Well, they tried to shut him down with that very message when about a year ago or 2 years ago, time flies. Yep. He had a stand-up routine basically saying you could say the N-word, but he goes, the alphabet? No, your ass is grass. And
exactly,
practically disbarred.
And this just goes to show the hypocrisy of the far left, because they want you to be tolerant of their viewpoints, but they're not willing to listen to anybody else's. And, again, I talked about this back when Dave Chappelle's last Netflix special aired. If you actually watch the special, there is nothing offensive about it. He talks about his transgender friend who committed suicide because she was hounded by the transgender community.
Yeah, but that's the left. That's what we talked about with the abortion debate. It's never based on fact. It's just social media riling them up, the mainstream, and there's nothing like the Virginia rallies when Trump took office and he was a racist. Half the people didn't know anything about Trump, and they just blindly follow and go protest and then have to go to safe rooms.
And that's why the left made such a big deal about Elon Musk buying Twitter, because now they're going to have to confront people who are arguing the other side instead of simply having them canceled. And
maybe having some facts at their disposal.
Right. And that's how discourse works. If you have a point of view and somebody else has an opposing point of view, you put facts in front of them. You debate them using the truth. But that's too difficult for the far left. That's why they just want people canceled.
Well, hopefully we will not be canceled and we'll move on and continue our progress, unlike CNN Plus. So very good episode, Dr. Lopkin. And again, I like that suggestion box that our listeners can access if they'd like to contribute, correct?
Yes, if you'd like the topic that we discuss, want your opinion heard about the topic, you can go to radio.com/actandknow. And of course, catch it so radio at xvadio.com website, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.
Very interesting, very great. And by the way, you didn't get it yet, but I did see it in some correspondence. I think Zucker just sent you his resume. He wants to work for Carnivore Radio. All right, take care, Dr. Lopkin.
We'll see you next time.